Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode, our second episode this week here at Dojo Live. My name is Kim Lantis, and it's my pleasure to be hosting today from hot and sunny Hermosillo, Sonora, Mexico. Joining me also from a hot and sunny place in Mexico is America Guerrero in Cancun. Hi,
Hey, did you
America.
hear the birds?
We
Here I
totally
am.
did, and it's beautiful. I love it. And today's guest, thank you so much for joining us today, is Anir Pradhan, COO of EMP Info. We're going to be talking about something that's, I think, very important to pretty much every company out there right now, and that is employee retention. But before we get to that, Anir, we'd like to get to know you a bit better. Please tell us about yourself.
Sure. Well, I appreciate you having me on the show. So thank you for that. I'm Anir Pradhan, and I am beaming in from hot and sunny and humid Atlanta.
Yeah,
So
America's got the humid. I'm missing that humidity. Rain
that's
come.
right.
I feel you.
That's right. So yeah, so I am with EMP Info. I'm COO. A little bit about me. Let's see. I came into this country at the age of 17. I was in India prior to that. And then I kind of fell in love with technology. My background is in engineering. I studied engineering, electrical engineering, and then got a master's in computer science and went down the technology path for a few years and figured that there's something more that I could learn in terms of dealing with people. And I wanted to do other things beyond engineering. So I decided to branch into business management. Started my career with went and got my MBA, and then when I did, I went and started in management consulting. I was working across different fields, different business problems we were trying to solve. Very soon, I found myself after my management consulting career with a HR and payroll company called ADP. It is the world's largest payroll company there. After ADP, that was my first foray into HR, and I know we're going to talk a lot about employees today. I went to work for Equifax. I was the chief marketing officer, senior marketing officer for one of the business units there called Equifax Workforce Solutions. Then later on, went to run strategy as SVP of strategy for the company. After Equifax, my career led me to working with a company based out of Atlanta called Oversight Systems. I was chief strategy officer over there. Oversight Systems essentially was a technology platform in spend analytics. And I find myself here now at EMP Info as COO, where we,
Nice.
yeah. So that's kind of my career journey.
It's interesting. I mean, a lot of the times with the guests, and I guess it's really shouldn't be surprising anymore, but we find that technology really is about people, right? What's the point if it's not making people's lives better? So I think how those two things merged in your life makes perfect sense. So let's talk a little bit about EMP Info. Who are you and what's the problem that you're solving?
Absolutely. So EMP Info, we are headquartered in the Silicon Valley area. We are the world's first and only hybrid verification platform. Let me explain what that means. What we provide is a technology where three different stakeholders can come together to perform a transaction. You have banks and lending institutions for the most part, employees and employers.
Okay.
These three stakeholders are together come in our platform, and we provide verification of employment and income to facilitate transactions such as obtaining a loan or getting a new apartment or getting a financing for your new car, or even sometimes it's a government agency that's trying to verify your employees' income and employment status so they're eligible for government benefits. So we bring three parties together here.
Nice. And and it makes a lot of sense because if I'm imagining most people are like me and paperwork and form filling and all that stuff is like my nemesis. I cannot handle it with a passion. So it's really, really great to see how that's going to work together. Thank you. So with that, let's talk about today's topic as chosen by you, Anir, and that is America.
Sure. So the topic that you choose is how to boost employee retention in the age of the Great Resignation. And the second question, how HR process automation for employment verification paired with an employee-centric approach can boost morale and even retention. So please, could you share more about this topic?
Yeah, absolutely, America. So, if you think about where we are today, uh, we are in the midst of a great resignation. That is that that's been the terminology that's been coined. But essentially, what we are seeing is elevated levels of turnover in the industry.
Mm-hmm.
If you kind of unpack that and find out the reasons why. Well, in fact, there was a recent article from Mercer that showed that stress is really the number one reason behind great resignation. And what does stress really mean? I mean, stress is certainly, we all know, has amplified over the pandemic. People are really worried about a lot of things. There is anxiety and stress in people's lives, not only during work, but even for their lives outside of work, right? So, in terms of the Great Resignation and what's happening over there is this stress that employees are subjected to almost. It's pretty acute, but it also manifests itself in different ways. So the fundamental question is, can employers do anything about it? Can employers do anything to alleviate or reduce some of the stress that employees are facing today? One of the key things we are finding out in terms of the stress is this stress in terms of
Filling
financial
out forms.
filling out forms. I mean, now let's talk about that example. I mean, we say this in jest, right? But think about a use case over here, right? An employee today, just take this example, is trying to buy their first home. Okay, they've saved up a nest egg, found their dream home. They've shopped around for low interest mortgage, which, by the way, if the mortgage rates just went up today. Uh, but they finally made an offer. Their offer has been accepted, and they're in love with their new, the thought of moving into a new house. Well, now the hard part really begins for that employee, and that is to get it's the whole mortgage application process, right? And one of the key things in that mortgage application process they look for is, hey, I need to know where you work and how much you make. These are some fundamental questions that mortgage companies ask. And these are just not questions. But now, according to regulations that have come up, especially in the US mortgage market, they're required to find the right documentation for it.
Right,
Those
which it
document
seems, it's on the face of it, it seems like a relatively simple question to answer, right? But it's not.
It's not, because they want 3 years of data. So, do I keep 3 years of pay stubs with me? Likely not, right? I'm supposed to also provide a verification that I'm currently employed. Well, those questions now can't be just answered by the employee. So, banks and financial institutions turn to employers, and that's where the calls go today. So they go to these to any employer and ask them, hey, does Kimberly work for this company? Right? Those questions need to be answered by the employers. And if those employers are not quick and efficient in answering those questions, that creates a lot of stress in an
It
employee's
completely,
life.
because at this point my hands are tied, and the meanwhile somebody else is looking at the home that I want to offer on, and if, let's say, their employer's moving faster than my employer, I could lose that at no fault of my own.
You got it. Exactly. So essentially what happens is, here you are, two scenarios, both, you know, person A and person B bid on the same house. They're both waiting for verification of their employment and income so that they can proceed with the mortgage, right? And mortgage one comes through much faster than mortgage two, right? So that in itself creates a lot of stress to those that are out in the marketplace looking for a new home. And if your employer has an automated way of providing this information, it just reduces a whole lot of stress.
All right, enter EMP info. So we understand now why this matters to the employee. What's in it for the employer, and then that third component here, the banking system.
Yeah, great question. So we talked about employee, and I mean, there are numerous examples. I just gave an example for new home. This can happen for a new auto loan. I'm buying my first car, or I need to replace my car. I need to get a new, there's a single mom who has applied for some government benefits, who is waiting for those benefits to be approved, and it's just taking a long time, right? So all of those are different life events in which employees can experience stress, in which that stress can be alleviated, or it can be addressed by employers. Now your question is, employers, what's in it for the employers, other than kind of being the caring employee that wants to do the best for the employees? Well, first and foremost, for an employee, now put yourself in a situation where you are in HR in a large organization, and you start to get these calls from who knows who, banks, government agencies, background screening companies. I have no means of knowing who is really calling me, right? So who is interested in this information, and has my employee even given consent for
Yeah,
this?
with so much fraud and everything that's going out there around right now.
Exactly. Is it your nosy neighbor calling just to find out how much you make? So all of this, one of the key things that we do at EmpInfo is we credential the verifier. So first and foremost, it needs to be a legit business, and they need to have the right purpose to ask for this information. And on top of it, we also make sure that the employee has given consent, right? So that's number one. It's to your point, it's ensuring data privacy of your employees and making sure that the data goes only to those that have the authorization to receive it. Okay. Two, it's efficiency, right? So you think about what an HR organization does if they are going to field calls all day just to answer questions about the employees. And by the way, it's not just employees, it could be even for former employees, especially if you're doing background verification for a new job, right? So
you've got you got employee stress also happening in your HR department.
Yeah, exactly. Those are your payroll. I feel my heart goes out to all of the payroll professionals and HR professionals who have to answer these questions, and the expectation is it's going to be done right now, right? Because no one wants to be waiting for their employer to be saying, "Hey, I'm gonna respond in 4 days." I mean, by that time, you may have lost that car, you may have lost that, the ability to get that government benefit, or who knows what, or even your job for that matter, right? So therein lies the pressure on employers, which through efficiency of automation, you can, EmpInfo provides that ability. We actually provide to employers that service for free. So
okay.
It is really.
So
it is
what's
really
your business model
no-brainer.
then? It's the banks who are picking up the tab. Who's paying for this?
You got it, because they are the ones who are the most interested in the data of that transaction. So, like I said,
Fair
it's
enough.
a platform where three parties come together. It's the lending institutions, the background verifiers, the government agency that need to verify all of this information. Either it is for regulatory purposes, or it could be for just the fact that they want to have a better assessment of risk for that particular consumer, which is that employee, right? So all of that can be addressed based on the data that they get from the employer, which we facilitate in our transactions.
Very cool. And I think that makes sense because, I mean, even if they're quote unquote picking up the tab, it works in their benefit as well, right? Because they're able to process loans quicker and get people in their system a lot faster. So where do you start when you're building this network? I mean, I mean, I suppose the employees is a given when you find the employers, but what's your chicken in the egg
Chicken
here?
and the egg.
Are you focused more on the banks, or are you focused more on the employer?
Yeah, so it is both a supply side and a demand side. That's the way we look at our business model. Is we have two sides to our business, which is both supply and demand, and both need to grow to get to the network effect, to be effective in this space. So that's how we have grown as a company. We have employers that have provided this directly to us. We also work with payroll companies, which these employers process their employee payroll through. And through these payroll partners that we have, we are able to source this information as well. So that's our supply side. And on the demand side, we work directly with large banking institutions, whether it's in mortgage, in auto finance, it's consumer lending. There are lots of fintechs that are out there, that are providing loans. I mean, one of the key things we are finding out. You talk about consumer lending. Most of 64%, in fact, of U.S. Of workers in the U.S. live paycheck to paycheck. They cannot even absorb a $500 shock to their budget for emergency purposes. And I mean, it could be anything like you have to make a $500 payment for an out-of-pocket expense for medical expense, or it's a tuition payment, or whatever it is, right? If you can't do that, you have to turn to other areas where you can either obtain credit or obtain the ability to get a short-term loan.
Right.
Well, these lenders and a lot of in the financial technology world, there's a lot of new business models that have emerged that look for data beyond what was a traditional credit score. And employment and income data is becoming more and more a requirement for those types of transactions. Okay. So it is probably easier for you to get a loan if you have a stable job and you can show a stream of income, right? And to be instantly approved for that emergency loan you may need as well, right? So that,
which in some ways I think is refreshing. I mean, we did have a guest on our show a while back with Varo Bank and this new approach. His personal story is really interesting as well. But this idea of when he needed the money, he couldn't get it because he didn't have. He too was immigrating from India. He didn't have the work history of these things, and then now, fast forward however many years later, when he has this amazing credit history and all this, and doesn't need the money, is when everybody's interested. And so I think in some ways it's refreshing to hear that credit score is no longer the only requirement, and that we're banking institutions are more open to be looking at things like employment history and income. And enter, I think let's switch this conversation back to the topic of employee retention and the Great Resignation. So another guest of ours a while back, this was Jim Donnelly. He's the CEO of Restore Hyper Wellness. Nothing to do with fintech, or he postulated that the Great Resignation there is no Great Resignation. People are just leaving, quote unquote, shitty companies. So what would be your stance on that? Is that fully true or not? And how can we as employers and companies not be shitty?
No, it's a great question. So we talked about value propositions for employer, employee, and for banking institutions, or we call them verifiers, right? Well, if you think about for an employer, we talked about the efficiency for automation, which is great. But by and large, when we get to the topic, which is around the great resignation, to me, it comes down to culture. Okay. And the way to retain people is to ensure that the companies are doing what they can to establish a culture of care for the employees. You need to care about your employees. And it's not just for the work that they do, but they have a life outside of work, right? So whether I am, again, sitting at 7 p.m. on a Friday evening waiting for my, car finance to be approved. If if that's outside my work hours, doesn't mean that the employer can't do anything about it. We can still instill through automation a way to ensure that that employee is being taken care of outside of work and their needs are being met. They need to understand the lifestyles of their employees and see the types of life events that they are engaged in and making sure that they are helping facilitate those life events, right, to the benefit of the employee as well. So I think, to me, you're absolutely right. They are leaving these companies because I don't think their cultures are aligned to the employees' values and the lifestyles and the life events that the employee, their employee base is going through as well. And because they are out of sync, I think it is incumbent upon employers to sync up with these employees, understand what are they going through and how can I facilitate transactions, right? What can I do to make their lives better? And I picked stress, right? The employee, everyone is going through these types of different stress during life events, and if that's the small thing an employer can do, I think that's a win. It's a win for them as well.
Completely. And I think it's a direct win for the company itself, making their finance areas and their HR areas all the more efficient. And why not? Right?
Why not? Exactly. So it's not only, so the way I look at it is not just, that you need to do it for the sake of efficiency and cost benefit and so on, but it's the right thing to do.
I love that. It's the right thing to do. So I think this actually speaks really highly of uh, EMP Info.
People centric
Yeah.
culture. Yes. So you have shared that you need to understand the necessities out there of the people and everything. How is it looks like to work at Info? How is the culture?
How is the culture at MFinfo? Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I'll tell you. So we, mentioned to you, we are a Silicon Valley based company. I would say we live and breathe technology, right? What we provide is a technology that is superior to anything that you see in the industry today, because we understand that what it means in terms of consumer or employee data privacy. That is key to us. So whenever we talk about employees or consumers, the two things we talk about is consumer experience and consumer privacy, data privacy. So that's kind of embedded in our DNA. Okay. Beyond that, we are a company that prides itself in superior customer service. We, it's a white glove treatment for our employers that we work with, or even on the other side, when it's a multi-sided platform, we work with banks and with banks as well. So we understand. So one of the key things for us is understanding what true needs are and making sure we can deliver the services to those true needs as well. Besides, it's a very collaborative culture. And I think at the end of the day, the way we ensure that we are aligned with our goals is because we all know that we got each other's backs.
I love that. It reminds me, I
Beautiful.
believe the title of the book is Peak, written by Chip Conaway,
Yeah.
about kind of going up that Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And I hear that EMP Info is kind of trying to answer the what is it? The unknown needs, right? Things that your customers and your employees might need that they don't even know that they
And
need.
they don't
And
even
that's what
know.
you're trying to discover and fulfill for them.
Exactly.
Very cool.
Yeah.
So, your advice as a company leader, what would be your final sort of words of wisdom to people who are in a position like yours at a tech company? Maybe something that you've maybe didn't do right the first time that you would have done differently and learned from. Uh, what would you say to people who want to search out those unmet needs and to fulfill them, and how to maybe go about doing that?
Yeah. Yeah. So great question. I'm a big fan of Simon Sinek, so I'm going to go back to some very fundamental things around understanding your why, right? To me, it is critical that as a company, you know what your why is, and make sure that whoever you're bringing on board in terms of your company culture is aligned to your why. Their why aligns to the company's why, right? If that is not aligned, I would say, that's kind of where most of the friction going forward, while the person that you hire might be the most talented, might be the most, might know the industry the most, or, have the skill sets that you so desire at that point in time. If in that journey, if your whys are not aligned, I think, so number one, I think a lot of companies really struggle to understand their why. It is more than, whatever, making, dollars for your shareholders and, getting market share and all that. That's all fine. To me, those are the results.
Mm-hmm.
But that's the what. But the why is pretty important. So I don't know whether it's an advice, but that's my mantra, is to make sure that I am I'm able to communicate that not only to the employees, my customers, my clients, all the stakeholders around. Get grounded in your why.
So MPinfo's why is to reduce stress. What's your why?
Our why is to ensure that we are partners with employers in their employees' life events, and making sure that those life events go smoothly.
Oh, I love that. Well, thank you. Thank you very much, Amir. It's been a pleasure to speak with you, to learn from you today. I wish nothing but success for you and Info as you continue to grow. We are actually coming to the final minutes of our show, and so with no further ado, I guess what we'll do is introduce tomorrow's show. We do have one coming up. America, what is that?
Yeah, sure. So the topic is prop tech is just fintech with a P. What steps do prop tech innovators need to take to realize the success of fintech? This conversation, we're going to have it with Joseph Pulverari. He is the co-founder and general partner at Pure Property Management, tomorrow at 12 p.m. Pacific.
Perfect. Well, yes, tomorrow at 12 p.m. Pacific. Don't miss it. Another show at Dojo Live. Thank you again, Amir. And
Well, I wanted to thank you again for having me. So I really appreciate it and enjoyed the conversation with both of you.
thank you. It's our
Thank you.
pleasure. All right. Have a great rest of your day, everyone.